Title: When the Skies Betrayed Justice. At 35,000 feet, 12-year-old Layla Hart struggled to breathe. Her throat burned, her chest tightened, and each gasp sounded more desperate than the last. "Water, please," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely rising above the hum of the airplane engine. The flight attendant, Miranda Powell, stood just inches away. Her name tag gleamed against her pressed uniform, and her smiley, at least for some, was polished and practiced. But not for Layla. Instead of offering assistance, Miranda turned on her heel and walked away, a small, satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Around Layla, other passengers were beginning to take notice. A few exchanged concerned glances as they watched the young girl's hands tremble in her lap. Yet Miranda continued down the aisle, cheerfully offering refreshments to white passengers, ensuring their drinks were poured just right and their requests answered promptly. What Miranda didn't know what would change everything was that seated in first class, just a few rows away, was Julian Hart, Layla's father and the majority owner of VistaJet Airways. The same airline whose uniform she wore. The same company that paid her salary. Julian didn't yet know his daughter was in danger. He was buried in acquisition reports, emails, and a spreadsheet tracking a merger. In his world, everything had a number, a value, a market trend. But nothing in his billion-dollar portfolio compared to the value of his daughter. Layla had always been his world. Born and raised in the Bronx, Julian had clawed his way out of poverty through brilliance, unrelenting work, and a talent for spotting opportunity where others saw risk. By the age of 42, he was one of the most influential investors in the country. His business instincts were matched only by the love he had for his daughter. Since his wife's death from cancer when Layla was just 5, Julian had raised her alone. He was her protector, her confidant, and her greatest supporter. He encouraged her to be independent, to think critically, and to never let the world decide her worth based on the color of her skin. When he acquired VistaJet 8 months prior, he did so with a vision not just to resurrect a flailing airline, but to bring dignity, equality, and excellence to every passenger experience. Which is why, on that particular flight to Paris' celebration of Layla's stray day, report card Julian chose to test the airline himself. Rather than travel on his private jet, he booked 2 tickets on VistaJet's commercial route, first class for himself and premium economy for Layla. It was a lesson in humility and independence. "Privilege should be earned, sweetheart," he had told her gently when she looked surprised. "I'll be a few rows ahead. You'll be just fine." But nothing about the situation unfolding was fine. Layla had always been careful. She knew her allergies-free nuts, in particular, could be serious. The snack she'd opened had no warnings, no indication it might contain traces. Yet moments after her first bite, the reaction began. Her tongue tingled. Her throat began to close. She reached for her backpack, found her antihistamine pill, and pressed the call button overhead. The light blinked. No one came. She pressed it again, and again. Finally, Miranda appeared. But instead of concern, her eyes were filled with disdain. "The call button is for emergencies only," she snapped. "Not for impatient little girls." Layla opened her palm to reveal the pill. "Water," she whispered. "Allergy." Miranda barely glanced down. "You'll wait like everyone else." She turned away, oblivious or indifferento the urgency in Layla's eyes. What she also didn't see were the other passengers beginning to rise in silent protest. Dorothy Benson, a 72-year-old retired nurse sitting behind Layla, leaned into the aisle. "Excuse me," she called gently. "That child looks unwell." Miranda smiled, that same polished smile she used when brushing off concerns she didn't intend to address. "Everything is under control, ma'am." But wasn't. A man across the aisle, Luis Navarro, discreetly began recording on his phone. He had seen too much already. Layla being ignored, served last, denied even the smallest courtesy while white passengers were treated with warmth and care. By the time Miranda completed her beverage service, Layla's condition had worsened. Her lips were pale, her breathing shallow. She fumbled with the pill, still unable to swallow it without water. A young woman beside her offered a bottle of water from her own bag. Layla gratefully accepted, managing to take the pill, but it was too late. The reaction had progressed beyond what antihistamines alone could reverse. Her EpiPen was in the overhead bin. She couldn't stand. She could barely speak. And still, Miranda ignored her. In the galley, she muttered to a co-worker, "I swear, these people think they're entitled to royal treatment. Can't raise their kids to be respectful anymore." Julian remained unaware until an urgent whisper from another flight attendant reached him. "Mr. Hart, there's been a medical emergency in premium economy. It may involve your daughter." He stood so fast his coffee cup toppled. Within seconds, he was down the aisle, pushing past startled passengers. And then he saw her. Layla lay slumped in the aisle, her eyes fluttering, her breathing ragged. A stranger knelt beside her. Dr. Nathan Klein, who had rushed from his seat after hearing the commotion. "She's going into anaphylactic shock," he barked. "Where's the emergency medical kit?" Carter Nguyen, a junior supervisor, sprinted forward with the kit. Miranda watched in silence. Julian knelt, cradling Layla's hand, his powerful presence shrinking to the desperation of a father watching his child suffer. Dr. Klein administered the EpiPen. Layla's breath shuddered. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Julian looked up, his voice low but cold. "What happened here?" Dorothy stepped forward. She begged for water. She was ignored. Over and over. Luis raised his phone. "I have the whole thing." Miranda stepped forward, flustered but defiant. "Sir, your daughter was disruptive. She pressed the button repeatedly and accused me of racism. I followed protocol." "Protocol," Julian repeated, rising slowly. Ignoring a child in medical distress is protocol. He reached into his jacket and handed her a card. "Julian Hart, Chairman, VistaJet Airways." Miranda's face paled. Julian turned to Carter. "MS. Powell is relieved of duty." "Immediately." Carter nodded. "Yes, sir." The rest of the flight was subdued. Julian sat beside Layla, holding her hand. Dr. Klein remained close, monitoring her vitals. Social media erupted. Luis' videos spread like wildfire. By the time the flight touched down in Paris, the hashtag Justice for Layla was trending worldwide. Julian didn't speak to the press. Not yet. He accompanied Layla to the hospital, where she was treated and kept for observation. In Atlanta, VistaJet's board panicked. Stock dipped. Sponsors called. The PR firm scrambled to draft a statement, calling it an isolated incident. Julian didn't let them. He called a press conference himself. "This is not an isolated incident," he said firmly. "It is the product of a culture that allows bias to hide behind professionalism. That ends now." He ordered a full audit of employee conduct records. He discovered 27 complaints against Miranda Powell in 3 years. 11 cited racial discrimination. All have been dismissed. Board members who tried to silence the investigation were exposed. Emails leaked. Power plays failed. Julian instituted sweeping changes, mandatory bias training, an independent ethics committee, and anonymous reporting systems. Miranda gave her own interview, calling herself a victim of reverse racism. But her words rang hollow against the video evidence, the testimonies, the data. Meanwhile, Layla quietly returned to school. She was greeted with mixed reaction support, curiosity, even cruelty from peers who echoed their parents' skepticism. "Dad says when people don't understand their own bias," she told a teacher, "they try to silence others who expose it." 6 months later, Layla stood before her school, delivering a speech about courage, justice, and the importance of using your voice. Julian watched from the crowd, his heart full. One girl, one voice, one flight, and the skies would never be the same again.